You can get close to the drivers, you can get close to the cars, you can really feel like you're involved in the action.
To see who can be fastest up the hill.
Looks like the Alpha is going to jump up to the top of the time.
1907, Mercedes, 120 horsepower. Now, this is definitely a contender in the pre-war category.
It's a fanfare by both cars.
Hello and welcome to a two-part special from Goodwood in West Sussex. I'm at the heart of the 12,000-acre estate, which is owned and managed by the 11th Duke of Richmond, Charles Gordon Lennox. His Grace is an entrepreneur with a deep passion for motorsport and fast, beautiful, unusual cars. He's a photographer and British aristocrat from a fascinating lineage. Goodwood House has been the ancestral seat of the Duke of Richmond since 1697. The 11th Duke grew up here and founded the renowned Festival of Speed, one of the most prestigious motorsports events on the planet, which spawned the much-loved Goodwood Revival, a retro festival of vintage dress and classic cars. The Festival of Speed kicks off on July the 9th, 4 action-packed days where the worlds of Formula One, endurance racing, WRC, MotoGP and other disciplines come together like nowhere else. Your Grace, thank you very much for inviting me here to your beautiful home. It's breathtaking coming up the drive. It's amazing being in the house, but gosh, tell me what's going on now in terms of preparations for the Festival of Speed.
Well, hi, yes, nice to have you here. Yeah, well, it's pretty crazy out there at the moment. Everyone's flat out building the Festival of Speed. It's a 2-month build. It's about a 3-month project each year, so 2 months to build it and a month to take it all down. So it is a massive build nowadays and requires literally thousands of people. And you arrived saying it looked lovely. Actually, it looks pretty chaotic, doesn't it?
Well, I'd imagine to you it probably looks a bit chaotic because I imagine when you look out of your window, you're not used to seeing all that scaffold all the time, but it looks exciting to me.
No, it is exciting. I mean, it's a massive human effort on a pretty gargantuan scale, but a lot of the people that come to the festival every year can't believe it when they come out of season, so to speak, and see the sheep out there and can't understand where their racetrack's gone.
The Festival of Speed, you started it in 1993, I think it was. Tell me how and why the idea came about.
Well, the Festival of Speed all started because we tried to get the racetrack, the motor circuit, going again, which my grandfather founded in 48 after the war. He was a very good driver, great engineer, he loved his cars, and raced very successfully before the war. So when these young pilots came to him saying that they'd turned this perimeter track to this RAF airfield into a racetrack, he thought he'd better have a look at it. So in September 48, he opened it as the first Goodwood race meeting.
That's incredible. So how did the idea for Festival of Speed come up?
Well, the Festival of Speed came up because we couldn't get that reopened again very easily. So when I came back to live at Goodwood in the early 90s, the first thing we wanted to do was we needed to drive some more revenue. So I thought, well, maybe we could turn the racetrack, get that going again. And I'd loved it as a child, and I'd always said, one day we must definitely try and get this going. It had been used for testing after it closed in 66, pretty successfully, but that ended in sort of noise problems and other things. So then it all just collapsed and it just sat there and disappeared, really. So the idea of getting it going again seemed an obvious one with all the history and the heritage, but that wasn't so popular locally in terms of noise.
No, I could imagine. And didn't it start back in 1993, almost outside of your bedroom window?
Yes, that was right out here. But so because we couldn't get the circuit re-going again, we wondered whether there wasn't something else that we could do at Goodwood to see if people still loved cars and racing and remembered Goodwood for what it was as really Britain's preeminent circuit just after the war. So we started the Festival of Speed in 93 as a little tester, having been told no one would come and we'd get a couple of thousand people if we were lucky, and 25,000 people turned up. So it was a big surprise and it just took off from there, really, but certainly something we were not expecting.
Here we go, right on board with Scott Speed as he heads up the hill. Let's see what he can do. Now, yes.
For those who haven't been lucky enough to come to the Festival of Speed, I've been several times. Can you give us a sense of what one might expect?
Well, it's unique, really, in that it celebrates every genre of motorsport, which any other event does. So everything from F1 to NASCAR to Indy to World Rally, Paris-Dakar, everything. And it also celebrates that across 100 years and more of the sort of history of the automobile. And as well as celebrating racing and racing cars and all genres of motorsport, it also celebrates the motor car, really, in just all its forms. So modern supercars, hypercars, old vintage cars, classic cars, anything we want, in a way. I used to dream when I was a child about these cars and hoping I could go to sleep when I was at school dreaming about them. And now they've all been here. And I've been lucky enough to drive a lot of them. More great cars in the world have been here than anywhere else.
What have been
That's
your
for sure.
favourite cars, Charles, to drive?
Oh, God, there have been lots and lots. Yeah, there's a 9083 Porsche, which is a Targa Florio Porsche from the 70s, which is sensational up here. But I've been super lucky, and I've driven so many great cars, which in some cases, like chaparrals and things, very few people have ever driven, let alone non-racing drivers. So that's been amazing. But the festival is really about celebration. It's the celebration of the motor car in all its forms, and also the whole motor industry and the modern cars and the future. So it's a unique mix, and the whole industry got behind it very early on.
You say the future there. I think you've got Tim Peake, haven't you, coming this year?
Well, you've got a thing called Future Lab, which is a massive pavilion we curate showing the future of mobility, connectivity, and actually just some fascinating bits of technology, but often connected to mobility in some way. And that's become a big thing in its own right. And Tim Peake's one of our ambassadors for that.
So will he speak about his space exploration?
I'm sure he will. There's a lot of space stuff going on. We had an Artemis rocket last year, so there's lots of good stuff.
Yeah, of course there is. I feel it's a real chance, whether you're knowledgeable on motorsport, which I'm not, or you're just passionate about cars, which I am. It's a real opportunity to get really up close and personal to the cars. They're spread all over the paddock, aren't they, from all different racing.
All over the whole site, thousands and thousands of them, yeah.
And then you're seeing some in action, of course, on the Forest Rally stage and the Goodwood famous hill climb. So there's action and a chance to really get to see some detail.
No, the big thing is it's dynamic. It's dynamic, and you can get really close to the cars and the drivers. Yeah, we've been super lucky with it. It turned out really well. And we had no idea really when we were starting it why people would feel so strongly about it. But really, before 93, if you wanted to see great cars in action, you probably were a member of a club. You probably raced a car yourself or owned it yourself. There wasn't really an opportunity for spectators to go and see this stuff. So when we created this event where people could actually get up close, really close, to the cars that they'd always dreamt of and loved, that was a whole new thing, and that's really been it. And since the beginning, still the standout for people, if you ask them, is that they can get close. We don't allow any cars to be cordoned off in any way, so everyone can get close, and the drivers are accessible, and so people feel very, very involved. And you said you love cars. Well, it's very much a shared experience, and much of what we do at Goodwood is about that. Whoever you are, whatever level, whatever your background or anything, it's just a very powerful shared experience for people. It is people's passion stream, and we're very lucky at Goodwood. Whatever we're doing, we have a little mantra which says horse racing, motor racing, golf, flying, shooting and cricket. We're very strong in all those areas, and we're so lucky. Most of the time we're just playing to people's passion stream, so people really love being here and they want to be here.
Absolutely. And drivers too. You get to meet some incredible drivers. Who are you looking forward to speaking to at this year's Festival of Speed?
We've got a fantastic lineup, as always, actually. We've got lots of big moments. We've got the whole Andretti family coming over from America again. We're doing a big Americana feature this year as well. It's been 250 years since the Declaration of Independence, which bizarrely the family was quite involved in all of that too. So we felt there was a real opportunity to make a bit of a fuss about that. Lando's coming, and Valentino Rossi's, they're coming together actually. So, and Valentino's been before, but he was huge when he came. A number of the F1 drivers, lots of big celebrations. It's going to be a huge year. It's 30 years since Damon Hill won his first World Championship, so it's going to be fantastic to have Damon here with us all weekend. So big celebrations there, and it's also 75 years since Ferrari's first Grand Prix win, so that's another big one.
Fantastic. Motorsport has been shaped by fierce rivalries over the decades, and many of those great stories from across the decades are brought to life on the hill climb.
When you first head up the hill for the first time, but certainly going to easily go up to the top of the times, over 3 seconds clear so far.
Yeah. Well, the festival is about the hill climb, so it's a piece of track that runs through the park in front of the house, a bit over a mile. We're very lucky. It just happens to be a very exciting piece of road. All the cars that are competing take part. So the thing that's going on all the time consistently is the cars are roaring past. The most important thing is it's very dynamic, all of it. You're seeing the cars in action. The hill is the core of that action, and they're all timed. And so you have this shootout at the end where you get the fastest car of the year.
I was smiling when you mentioned the hill climb, because doing a little bit of research, didn't you have quite an experience on the hill climb in your mum's Morris 1100?
MG 1100 actually it was. Yeah.
What was it, MG 1100?
Yeah, no, I did indeed. I decided to take my mother's car joyriding. Got to the top, came tearing down, and hit some gravel on the way. Not so clever.
Not so clever. Were you only 16 at the time?
Yeah. I was in hospital for quite some time, actually, and the police had a bit of a crack at having a go at me because I shouldn't have been driving at all. But as it was here, it went no further. But yeah, that wasn't my finest hour.
Not your finest hour. And I think it wasn't your friend's finest hour in a Land Rover when you were young as well. Wasn't there a bit of calamity in a Land Rover when you were a young teenager?
A Land Rover into my parents' horse box. Yeah, that wasn't very clever either.
I bet they weren't very amused, were they?
No, but it turned out not to be our Land Rover. So I'd taken the Land Rover, which was in the yard, and the Land Rover was the groom's boyfriend's father. So this wasn't good either.
Oh, no. With an abundance of land as your backyard, was there a real temptation, because you've got fuel flowing through your veins from your grandfather's past, to get behind the wheel young?
Well, I desperately wanted a go-kart, and I eventually got one. And yeah, I used to just tear around out here in it all the time, buzzing cars and being a general nuisance. I worked out little tracks, a lot of it up the Festival Speed Hill, actually, and then I had a little circuit at the top and came back down again. It was really fun, yeah. So I know that bit of road quite well.
Did you ever have ambitions to race and become a professional driver?
No, not really. I've always loved cars, and I've raced a little bit, much later, far too late. When we started the Festival Speed and things and Revival, I've done a bit of racing, but came to it rather too late and loved it, and that would have been fun to have done it early. But I was very busy. I left school very early. I was working very early, so I was flat out doing other stuff.
Your parents moved here, I think, in the late 60s and took on the massive task of restoring, I think it's 17th century, isn't it, the house. Will you share a little bit of the history, Charles, of Goodwood House and your family connection to it?
Well, the family have been here for 350 years, or whatever it is. And all these sports that we celebrate at Goodwood were very much the passions of the various individual members of the family. So we've really just tried to pick up on those enthusiasms, and they all, were able to indulge in those passions in a way. The house existed because the first hunt in the world was here, and that's why they bought the house originally. And then they obviously built onto it extensively. And then the cricket, another huge thing. So we got the earliest written rules of cricket in our archives. So the second Duke was crazy about cricket, and he wrote those rules. And the first game of cricket actually was played here in 1702 or something, so really, really early. Not the first game of cricket, but the first game at Goodwood. And I think the rules are 1727, so we've got a big year, big anniversary, 300 years next year. And horse racing was 1801, first public meeting here at Goodwood, the third Duke. They used to race their horses privately, and then they had so many people coming to watch them that they turned it into a public meeting in the early 19th century. Yeah, so that's a good example of Goodwood becoming a shared experience. So I think people have always been invited in. That's important to me and important to what we do here. So very much people invited in rather than kept out, and sharing in these passions and these sports. And then golf was just around the First World War, and the 7th Duke built a lovely golf course, got James Braid to build them, who was a great champion at the time. This lovely golf course, which still exists, and we operate on top of the downs. Really, really beautiful position. And then flying, my grandfather was a great pilot before the war, and then he obviously allowed the RAF to requisition the airfield and turn that into a Battle of Britain airfield. And it's that perimeter track, that airfield, that he then turned into a racetrack immediately after the war in 1948.
He sounds quite a man, your grandfather.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was a very good engineer. He loved clever, small, lightweight cars, and he built them and raced them and had the first team of MGs, actually. And he won some major races. His parents hated him driving, I think, so he didn't race very much, but when he did, he was quite successful. Yeah, it was because of him taking me to the racetrack and spending a lot of time with him that I got this disease from him as well.
And he flew. What did he fly?
Oh, he had all sorts of planes, actually. But he made one. It was called the Richmond Light Aircraft, which he built himself, and they were going to put into production before the war. So very clever, very light, very cheap, utilitarian passenger aircraft. And then the war came and that put an end to that. So he ended up making these very, very special laminated propellers for Spitfires and things.
And of course, Spitfires fly here. On the drive to Goodwood today, there are a couple of Spitfires in the air.
We were so lucky, yeah. There are two two-seater aircraft here. They're airborne a lot. And of course, at the Revival, when we started, till very recently, it's all got much more difficult. We were flying Spitfires and Hurricanes and all sorts of wartime aircraft all the time. It was spectacular.
And do you have any particular memories of watching any incredible moments of racing with your grandfather, any record-breaking moments, or meeting any of the legendary drivers with him, your Jackie Stewarts of this world?
Well, lots of the drivers would stay here, so I met lots of them and went down to the track with him and met them in the paddock and things. There was always a cocktail party on the Saturday evening. So for the Easter Monday race meeting, they'd practice on Saturday. Obviously no racing on Sunday in those days, and then race on Easter Monday. And I remember at that party, Jackie Stewart was there for the first time in his early 20s, and my grandfather saying, you need to watch him. He's going to be a great driver. And of course, Jackie went on actually to be discovered here in a way. So Robin Mackay, who's the track manager, called Ken Tyrrell and said, you should come and see this young driver. He looks pretty good to me. And Jackie was signed by Ken very soon after that.
And of course, Sir Jackie did so much for safety as well. We featured him on the podcast, actually, on one episode.
Great.
We talked all about the safety side of things, and he told me he was terribly unpopular with racetracks at one point because of the safety regulations that he tried to bring in. He's still quite a legend, isn't he?
Oh,
and
gosh, absolutely.
doing amazing things.
Amazing.
The Race for Dementia now with Helen suffering from dementia. So it was a privilege to have him on. And of course, it spawned your passion, I won't say disease, your passion for cars. I gather there's not an awful lot of cooking that goes on in the old kitchens here. Do the kitchens still house some of your cars? And what are your favourites out of those?
Gosh, I got a couple of cars my grandfather's, which are very nice. Well, a couple of cars he designed. Yeah. So he built special bodies in the 30s for certain English sports cars and Lancias actually a bit. But I've got a very nice AC, which he designed in the early 30s, which is a lovely thing. And
do you still drive these cars? That sounds perhaps quite a naive question, but are they still in drivable condition?
Yeah, they're all working, absolutely.
And so you can potter off around the estate?
Yeah.
Do you ever pinch yourself, Charles? You grew up here. This is your family life. And I suppose when one grows up somewhere like this, you perhaps don't know any different. But you seem to me like you've got a real sense of how lucky you are to have Goodwood House, to want to share it with people. Did you realise that you were perhaps a little bit different as a child and that this was quite unusual with a family with such rich heritage and incredible stories and living in such a beautiful location?
We're very, very lucky. It has certain responsibilities as well, but it's wonderful living here and it's wonderful having all these things that we do, which people feel so strongly about and really, really enjoy. So it's great doing something which mostly people are very, very happy about.
And you grew up with a few siblings, didn't you? So I imagine great fun with your
I've got 4 sisters.
And 4 sisters.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about mum and dad and family life here.
Well, my parents were very unusual. They were very modern. They didn't go about things in the way what people might have expected, so they were very unusual in that sense. They took this on in 1967. Certainly the house hadn't really been lived in since the war. They'd opened it up for the horse racing, which was a really big thing in July. That was the sort of major event, always the last week of July. And we'd all come down as children and stay here. And likewise for the cars, the motor racing started in 1948, closed in 1966, and the Easter Monday meeting, we'd always be here for that. But otherwise, the house really wasn't opened up. They didn't live here unless they were entertaining. I think it was a huge feeling after the war that even a lot of people who could afford to live in these houses just didn't want to. I mean, I think in this instance it was difficult. There was no money. No one had any money out then. And people were giving all their houses to the National Trust. And houses were being knocked down at a huge rate. It's shocking. Thousands of great houses were knocked down at that point. So my parents decided to take it on, give it a go. Really, that was pretty much it. Well, we'll just see what happens. We've got 750 people work here now. There were very, very few people then, probably no more than 50 or something. And they took it on and made a real go of it. High rate tax was 98% in 1967, and they had very little help, and they did a great job.
How did they inspire you?
They had a very strong feeling about what was right and wrong, what was a good way to make the most of a place like this, and what their responsibilities were, to the local community. My father was very, very active in all sorts of organisations, charities, local community projects. And so I think they had a very particular way of doing things.
Did they teach you about the family as well? Did you learn about the history of your family and what had happened over the centuries?
I think we're super fortunate, and I guess you don't really realise it when you're in it, but the history is, well, it's good and bad, I suppose. Depends how you feel about it. The history is everywhere, so there's a constant reminder. So you know exactly where you come from and who's been here before, and it's all very visible.
Have you enjoyed exploring those stories as you spent more time here?
Absolutely. No, there's some great stories. There's a big story literally coming out this week, actually, about the 3rd Duke of Richmond, called The Radical Duke, about the huge role he played in the American War of Independence and the Declaration of Independence and all these things. It's fascinating. It's been researched for about the last 10 years by a Harvard professor, and the book comes out on Friday, I think. But it's a fascinating story. So he really was a major player in trying to get government to change its thinking towards that. He was involved with Thomas Paine. Him and Thomas Paine became very close friends. He was politically very out there and much loathed by George III, and played a fairly difficult and treacherous role in many ways, I think. And it's only just been discovered, all of this, because his papers were all burnt when he died. But he was a hugely influential figure politically and played a big part in the Declaration. Because it all started with Danielle Allen, who's the writer. She found, completely by chance, this finest parchment copy of the Declaration in the local record office in Chichester and thought, what is that doing there? That's really weird. And then discovered that Thomas Paine was a tax collector in Lewes. So that's quite near. That's a bit, what is going on? And then put this whole thing together, which is an extraordinary story. There was all this historical fact, which had all got lost after his death.
And you didn't know anything about it?
We knew a bit about it, but nothing on that, no. I knew that he'd sailed he allegedly, though I think Danielle said she didn't actually put this in her book because she wasn't sure it was true, but he allegedly sailed his yacht through the middle of the British fleet, bearing the flag of the independent America. So he knew things like that he was pretty disruptive and didn't get on well with the king. But we didn't really know he was that closely and really seriously politically connected in that way, and actually had a lot to do with the position of the sovereign's role and Parliament now. So that's exciting.
It must be really exciting when stories come out like that you didn't know. And of course, there's royal connections going back, again, a number of centuries, aren't they, to, I think, was it King Charles?
Charles II, yeah.
Charles II?
Yeah.
So that's back in the lineage somewhere, some royal connections.
The Charles II's French mistress was the mother of the first Duke.
So, gosh, what an exciting family history. Just wanted to touch, before we wind up on this episode, a bit about Rolls-Royce. Their stunning factory, which is designed by Sir Nicholas Grimshaw, who also created the Eden Project, is based on the estate too. What are your thoughts on Rolls-Royce? Do you enjoy the Rolls-Royce cars?
Oh, they're fabulous, yeah. I think BMW done a fantastic job of taking on that brand, and it's been fascinating being involved in that for the last 20 years, because BMW were closely involved with First Speed early on. They've been great supporters, and because they had nowhere to build Rolls Royces, they were given the IP and the opportunity to build them, but had no factory. So then we're looking around for somewhere, and there were 4 or 5 different places, of which we became one. Then there was a kind of competition for where we'd end up with it. Anyway, we won that, which was terrific, and we have been closely involved ever since, and it's been brilliant to have taken that British brand, which was not in good shape 25 years ago, whatever, it really wasn't, and to then bring it back as the best car in the world and to make such a success of it. It's been wonderful, and for it to be here is great, and it's great for this part of the country. Everyone said it was mad to build cars in the south of England, but what a success they've made of it, and the relationship's very, very strong. They'll all be here for the Festival of Speed, and Rolls-Royce obviously play a big part in what goes on the estate.
When I started doing some work for Rolls-Royce, they wanted to integrate me in the brand, and I live in Shepherd's Bush in London, and they offered to lend me a Phantom for the weekend, which I have to be honest with you, even though I'm passionate about cars, I politely declined because I imagined a key up the side of the car, or tried to imagine reverse parking. But instead, I came to Goodwood and we raced in Rolls-Royces.
Good.
Which was fantastic. We did the skid pan. Yep. And went round, first of all, without the Rolls-Royce controls on, which I nearly took my cameraman out when I was behind the wheel. And then we put the controls on. And when you go to the factory, it's just so beautiful. You see the craftsmanship and every tiny detail, from the walnut to the galaxy canopy. I'm not thinking of the right name for that. You know what I mean? The stars that you can have on the... But the beauty of the cars, they really are something special. And the factory's all sustainable, isn't it? With green on the roof, so you can't see a factory from the air. It's been so well thought out. It feels like a perfect Goodwood fit, is it?
I think it is, isn't it? It's gone brilliantly well and wonderful. It's such a success, and you really can't see it from anywhere. So you can go up to the racecourse at the top of the downs and look down, and you just can't see it. So Nick Grimshaw and his team did a great job of that. And obviously for us, it had to fit here with what we were doing and be part of this landscape and part of the estate. And I have to say everyone was very sensitive to that, and they only wanted the best as well. So it's worked really well.
That's very special. Well, we'll leave our chat there for now. And in part 2, which will come out in September, we'll explore the Goodwood revival. You've been listening to the 11th Duke of Richmond, Charles Gordon Lennox, talking about the fuel running through his veins, his love of motorsport, and the upcoming Festival of Speed. Download and subscribe to our series at convex.podbean.com, or search The Convex Conversation on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to yours. I'll be back next week with another inspirational guest.